Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Addicts Advocate. I am your host, Dusty Dean, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the show Ashley Elizabeth. How are you, Ashley?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for spending what is it, Friday now? So Friday
That's
morning, Friday
it.
afternoon, where you're at, to spend some time talking all things recovery, addiction, how we got there, where we're going, what's worked, what hasn't. And you have a company that you are working that is called Beyond Sobriety, and you focus on sobriety coaching and as well as I believe some psychedelic healing, and that's one of the main reasons why I had you on the show because I am very fascinated about it. I have my own theories about how pharmaceuticals are playing into recovery. I battle mental health issues. I'm a late diagnosis ADHD, a little bit midlife diagnosis bipolar. That was obviously integrated into my struggles with trying to come to an acceptance of who I am. And trying to put down the bottle, really what it came down to, because it was destroying me, and I was a unhappy man. I've used weed a lot in my life too. I have opinions about it that are different than alcohol when it comes to addiction, just as much as a lot of people from, I think, the ketamine perspective, as well as other psychedelic healings, as far as what's helped. And I'm very much a recovery is personal thing, and that what works for one may not work for another. I've seen a lot of unfortunate, gridiron old school AA members that have 30 to 40 years clean worth of sobriety, and they have a methodology that unfortunately for some nowadays that are getting sober just doesn't work for them. That discipline, the society doesn't call for it anymore, and or it's just where they're at in their life. It just doesn't work. And so, I think that what's important, right, is that we get to the point of trying to abstain, whatever it is that's causing our destruction, right? That's huge. And so sometimes it's not always what we think it is. Sometimes, there are things, right, medicines and such, and or even therapies that are saving lives that maybe are unconventional. But we're growing as a society, hopefully, right? We're growing in our wisdom. We're growing in what truly addiction means, because we find that addiction can be in anything. And the world is suffering from one in a major way right now with phone addiction, right? And we're blind to it, and we just let things be. And you really don't really see the symptoms until you ask the 5-year-old to give you the phone back and they have a temper tantrum and you're like, whoa. And then so all of a sudden now you've recognized that, it has a way to creep itself into our lives in so many ways. We have dopamine imbalances, or we're dopamine addicted. We have, inherent, chemical imbalances in our brains that crave, that cause us to crave things, and create an imbalance in our lives. And as the science is increasing, there's also still, I think, more mystery about how and why it all happens, and the correct approach. And so to me, this is about compassion. This is about love and understanding. This is about healing. And so regardless of how you get there, let's get there, But enough about that. Please, I'm curious to know, how you got to this point in your life. You're glowing. I just got to tell you, you're absolutely glowing. You look like you're in the best point of your life right now. And just like looking at your TikTok, because that's how I met you. You've obviously have learned a lot, but you have a spirit about you. You have a happiness about you. You have an empowerment about you that I'm excited to understand how you got to this point. So please take it away, Ashley.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think you hit on so many beautiful points, but I think the place for me to start is kind of like my backstory. So, much like yourself, I also was diagnosed with ADHD, but I was actually diagnosed at about 7 years old. And so I was put on large amounts of stimulants very early on. I was encouraged by my family, by the medical system, and even by the public school system that I was a much better student when I was on stimulants. And so, fast forward to being an adult who, inevitably ends up struggling with alcoholism. I slipped into an addiction with cocaine, and it was the stimulant that I chose to be on. It was what got me through my master's degree. And I like to tell people about my story because I am a high functioning addict, or I was. I was living in Silicon Valley, much like yourself. I had a six-figure career. I had obtained a master's degree. I graduated with honors. And, I pride myself on the fact that I was able to do all of that under, you know, the stimulants and the substances. But it was such a fractured foundation that I was standing on that it eventually came crumbling down around me, right? Like the realities of my substance abuse eventually surfaced, and the life that I had created came crumbling down around me. And that's really what started this healing journey that I've been on the last 5 years. 2 months after I had obtained a master's degree, I got a DUI. And that really kind of started this reframe around, okay, maybe I'm not as in control of this as I thought. Maybe I do have a problem. So it's been an unraveling ever since then. As you mentioned, there are so many different routes that people can take to go sober or to really redefine sobriety for themselves. And that's really a big part of like my mission and my business model is beyond sobriety, right? Like what is beyond this decision to finally put the substances down, sit with what the root cause is, and then set up sustainable long-term, strategies and supports for yourself. So that way you're not reaching for unhealthy coping mechanisms and you are able to kind of, reclaim your life and take ownership over that. So I'm happy to kind of go into more detail about that if you're ready. Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
So 5 months into choosing to walk away from alcohol and cocaine, I was still very much in the mindset of I don't have a problem with cannabis. I am going to do the California sober route. So I'm sure you're familiar with the terminology, right? Being California sober, right? You're still smoking the green while also, stepping away from the other harmful toxins and substances. And so with that, my friend group was having a hard time with me not drinking, and they weren't necessarily the most supportive. So that actually shifted my, okay, I'm open to working with plant-based medicines in a more broad way. Instead of drinking alcohol with you, fine, find me some mushrooms. Like I'll take psilocybin while you guys are drinking, like whatever. I'm going to preface for anybody listening, like that is not the route to go.
Exactly.
Psychedelics are a ceremonial medicine that you need to work with intention. I took it recreationally one time and I never took it recreationally again. That
Same.
night really, huh?
Same.
Same. Yeah. Yep.
One time.
It was a
That's it.
one time
Done.
and I quickly learned and it was a beautiful experience. I'm really grateful for it. It basically lifted this veil above my eyes that showed me that my entire life that I had been living was essentially a lie. And it granted me enough information for me to start being curious about what the truth was. And so I had found a medicine woman in Southern California shortly after that, started working with psilocybin pretty regularly. And it literally just continued to support this path that I had decided to start navigating. It was really beautiful, shifted so much for me, so much in terms of the way that I walked through life, viewed life, partook in life, right? Like there were so many things that really supported this newfound identity that I was unraveling and rediscovering. And I'm so grateful for that experience. And a lot of the work that I do is related to supporting people in stepping away from substances, really getting to the root cause. My background's in behavioral psychology, so I have a master's degree in supporting people with the science behind how to modify behaviors. But then also I have the spiritual component of it where I started working with psychedelics and I realized how that all can be interlaced with one another. And so, so that's part of what I offer people is how to utilize plant-based medicines in a really healthy, healing, educational way, if that's something that they choose to do as well. Not required, but if they choose, then I'm happy to be a steward in some manners.
I love it. I love it. Touched on a lot of good points. In talking about, some of these therapies and in getting sober, one of the things that was profound for me was that, in experiencing some trauma in my life, right? I recognized that there was a period where I felt like I needed to find a way to reset or rebalance my nervous system. because I felt like it was just transient throughout everything, every aspect of my life. It was almost like I felt like I was short circuiting in a way, right? Um, Trauma interlaced with addiction, interlaced with the, financial trauma as well as familial trauma that had happened, right? All kind of clumped together, and so you feel like you're existentially trying to hold on for dear life, in some of those crisis moments. And that's why people choose to escape, right? We choose to try to get down these pathways in which we're going to at least feel better for the time being. I'll manage my problem later. Um, the problem is, right, we know that that's a loop, right? It's a loop that you never get away of unless you get to the root causes as to why, the trauma is. Because, unfortunately, we just don't want to face things anymore, right? I find it even in like the business world. It's like we have an inability now to make decisions. Somebody has a hard time putting their foot down and saying, no, this is the way we're going to go. And it's just, and I think we're just scared of consequences. We're scared of the unknown. And we do this constant justification in our head because that's what addiction does to us. No, you're different. No, you're okay. But from there, people are raw when they go into sobriety. They're like, well, I had this thing that supported me and now it's gone. So I have this loss in my life and I don't know how to navigate it without. That's the one of the scariest parts in sobriety, in recovery, right? It's that whole brain modification and the chemicals trying to rebalance inside of your head while you're navigating what I do with all this free time now. Because I used to just let it wash away down the bottle, or I'd change my mood so it wouldn't matter anymore. But now I just feel like I'm sitting here and watching the clock tick by. Um, and so I think that because what ends up happening, right, unless we get to the root of it, we end up just occupying ourselves with other things. We inadvertently become addicted to work, or we become addicted to being a good parent. I mean, we psychoanalyze everything we do with our relationships with our kids to make sure that we're, I'm going to pull all this energy somewhere else. And it's like, well, I think the reality of it is that this energy output is just imbalanced too, right? So we got to get our energy right inside. The psychedelic thing, it's something that I think that in recent years I've come to understand really well, is that unfortunately, yes, when we use some of these drugs recreationally, we're using them all wrong. They have a place, but you have to obviously set yourself up for that place. This
Mm-hmm.
intention, people don't understand how powerful intention is, right? And I think it's just the same as when these youngsters are getting too high on weed and they start freaking out and stuff. I'm like, you guys' intentions are all wrong, and you're just totally abusing something. You have no idea why, how, and where it's used. My question for you is that, with how do you prevent one from still falling into that trap of wanting to constantly go back to that place? You know what I'm saying? To
Yeah,
escape again. How do you how do
absolutely.
you how do you help that?
Yeah, I think that that's such a very, very potent question to ask, because I think that there's a big misconception when people start talking about how they utilize psychedelics in their healing journey, because the misconception is that you're just moving from one substance to the next substance.
Right.
But what you really alluded to is like intentionality is everything, right? Like you're not, or you should not just take it because you're trying to escape. That's actually not what the medicine is going to be doing for you at all, which is why people often have really uncomfortable experiences, because they don't really understand what the medicine is doing for them, right? So it's really my biggest mission is to educate people on what is actually happening when working with psychedelics. And when you choose to work with psychedelics, it is with the fact that like you are working with a essentially a therapist in plant form. So it's like, do you really want to go to a bar and start working with your therapist? Like that's not an appropriate setting. Do you want to
I
be
like that.
surrounded by
Yeah.
all of your friends who are getting completely hammered and shit faced, and you're sitting here trying to like have a conversation with your therapist? Again, not an appropriate setting. Right? So if you start to reimagine what these psychedelics are, right? Like they are spirit in plant form that you are communing with, that you are, working with in a healing manner. Then you need to realize that like set and setting are really important, who you're around, where you're at, in addition to what are your intentions, right? Again, this, you do not take psilocybin to escape. You take psilocybin to lean in to what it is that you've experienced, to unpack what it is that you've, tried to run away from. You're not going to want to do that in the middle of like a bar scene, like, or a club like that. You're going to traumatize yourself even further. So, if you are interested in opening up your heart to the idea of working with plant-based medicines, then there are a few things that I really love to support people in. One of them is, what nervous system regulation tools and strategies have you mastered and are you currently working with on your own? Because they are going to play a huge role in working with psychedelics. If you're choosing to work with psychedelics and you've already mastered some of those skills, or you have a good idea of like how to calm yourself down in the height of a moment, who are you going to be working with? Are you going to be doing this on your own in your home, whether it's a microdose or a larger dose? Do you have somebody who can trip sit for you? Meaning, do you have somebody that you can call if you need to talk things through, or you need to have somebody calm you down? What is your set and setting going to be like? In terms of, you know, are you going to be doing it outside? Like, obviously, we're not going to be, driving a vehicle. Going back to the who are you working with, like having discernment. If you are choosing to work with a shaman or somebody, like, did you vet them? Have you heard of anybody's recommendations for them? Like, what are their reviews? You don't just want to be sitting with anyone, because you are going to be in an altered state of mind and being, and you want to make sure that you're safe, right? Like, the intention behind why you're working with plant-based medicines is to unpack what you've already experienced, not to pack on more trauma that you're going to have to work through later.
I love it. And I think that's huge. Thank you for, for kind of explaining that, because I think that people don't know. People don't know what the intent is. People don't know how to approach it. People are curious, right? And I think that
Yes.
we start crossing over into things here, right? When we start talking about plant-based medicine healing, because, there's a notion, right, that first of all, addicts typically are hyper thinking people, right? We're typically double thought process of what a normal person would be. So we're hyper analyzing, we're hyper focused. At times but we're just constantly moving in our heads. And so, and I think that again, if we get a general malaise for life, right? And we get an unhappiness, we get a yearning, a searching, a wanting for something that's either, purpose defined, something that gives us gratitude, something that gives us reasons, right? I think at some point in our life, it's inevitable that we sit there and we go, what are we doing here, right? And so people
Yeah.
start becoming curious, and they want to explore. So, and inadvertently, right, at the very least, right, if I can't get a medicine inside of me that changes my viewpoint on it, at least I can get my medicine inside of me that calms me down, right? So that's why people resort to alcohol and such, right? But I think that there is this internal yearning, right, that a lot of addicts are dealing with, and so it's almost sensical, right? Because we want to heal. And in a sense, we're trying to evolve. We're trying to grow. We're trying to become better human beings, as much as it seems like we're not. Um, I very much, especially with just having to explore the pharmaceutical realm of mental health medication, right? I very much have changed my tune on it. As ironic as it is, I've always been the addict that never wanted to take any medicine, right? And it's just, and I think
Same.
that a lot of us are like that. It's like, no, don't give me
Same.
any Vicodin after a surgery. I'm no way in hell I'm taking that, right? I
Right.
was always that way. Because I was always, in a weird way, I was always trying to be healthy in that regard. And the irony is that I've been an avid weightlifter since I've been 17 years old. I just turned 50. And so, I had these competing forces within inside of me and yet at the same time, right, always my use was always a justification. It was always a health benefit in some way, shape, and form for me, because I didn't want to address the underlying reasons. I didn't want to, open up can of worms. And so, and especially being a man, right, of the house, right, you're like, no, we don't talk about those things. We just muscle through them. I grew up in the 80s, so there was a lot of, conform, get in line. And there was something that you had said, this whole conforming to our system thing regarding stimulant use back in school, right? That's the thing I think that we've totally missed the ball on. I remember growing up in elementary school, there was usually three classifications of kids in classes. There was just, the normal class, if you will, whatever normal is. But then you would have typically like the severely handicapped, mental retardation, that class, right, where those kids had special needs and were being addressed, right? But then you had this other class, which was kind of like I needed the drill sergeant instructor because they were just problematic. They didn't conform. And so we're going to medicate them to get them to conform, right? And you find that those are now the ones that were really the ADHD ones. So those are the ones that were maybe autistic spectrums. Those are ones that, and that's where we've dropped the ball. We should have been conforming to their needs instead of forcing them to conform to our system, right? And so, it's the Ritalin, it's the Adderall, it's all these pushes that have happened back when it did. And the irony is that just like you had said, I know an individual who on Adderall built a $100 million business. And at the same time, he's in recovery for it because of just where it ended up taking him, right? He ended up probably feeling like he was on this trajectory, was doing all these great things, and then it ended up taking over his life. And you're thinking, Adderall, how does that even happen? I've never used it. But it's just, so I think that, again, it's that whole, what does an addict look like? you'd be surprised, right? Relationships. You had talked about your relationships with some of your friends. How are those? Are those basically those people, and that when you started, those people completely out of your life now and you have a whole new set, or did they come to your side?
Well, I want to actually circle back around to the whole conformity thing. So my
Yeah.
my first career, actually, I taught children with autism. That was my passion for so many years. It was absolutely beautiful. I ate, breathed, slept, wanted to advocate for those who couldn't advocate for themselves. And after I had started my own journey and actually had a spiritual awakening, did I have this newfound perspective that the reason why my children are still segregated is because they are unwilling to conform. They are literally deemed different and dumbed down because they are unwilling to conform, right? Anybody who is willing to speak against the system is ostracized and burned at the stake, essentially. And I had to walk away from the classroom because I was unwilling to support a system that was literally like segregating. And it's so much trauma, so many different layers that go into all of this. But when you have children who see through a system so clearly and are unwilling to abide by the rules that are set before them, right? Like, I honor that. I honor that. And that's really why I have started the work that I've started, is because, so on Instagram, I'm known as Rebel Beyond Sobriety, because this is a rebellion. It is a movement that is showing that there are major issues systematically, and those issues have pressured us into overexerting ourselves, overextending ourselves, not having boundaries, conforming. We have conformed, and it broke us. It literally compounded to the point where we were unable to feel comfortable in our own skin because we wanted to, be seen by society as like, oh my God, they're checking off all the boxes and they're so successful and they're doing all these things. But at what cost, right? It's at the cost of not honoring my own personal boundaries, not showing up for myself in the way that I need. So it's so layered, and it all stems from the systems that we have been programmed by, right? The medical system saying like, you have this diagnosis, you clearly are incapable of managing this on your own, let me throw you on a pharmaceutical. Then you go to the school system and they're like, oh, well, you're not learning like the rest of the students in your class. God forbid we look at the fact that we have one curriculum for millions of children rather than looking at millions of children and how they need to learn the curriculum at hand, right? We look at, just the work environment, right? Like, not everybody functions the best during a 9 to 5, but yet we're forcing everybody to show up from 9 to 5, right? Like, what about the people who are night owls who do better work in the evening? What about the people who can knock out their work in an hour? Like, why do they really need to be sitting there at a desk for 8? Like, why are they being punished, right? So there's a lot of different systems that are unfortunately forcing us into conforming,
Yeah.
and then we are deemed the problem because we've broke. And
Right.
now we're deemed misfits because we're sitting here speaking up against it. Well, I have always advocated for those who can't speak for themselves. And now I'm advocating for myself in lieu of other people who are not comfortable being able to speak up for themselves, right? Like, this is a movement where we're sitting here saying, no longer am I willing to conform. No longer am I willing to self-sabotage myself in the means of conformity. And now I'm going to share and speak to what it is that I've had these realizations to with confidence, so that way somebody else is granting themselves permission to be like, you know what, fuck this. I'm going to start setting boundaries. I'm going to start, listening to my own inner soul. What is it that I actually need? Rather, what is it that society is forcing me to conform to?
And unfortunately, just like you're saying, we've hit it's such a, and it's so deep. It's such a, I mean, it's a continual fight to try to open up the eyes to people for this, right? I think that a lot of times, right, it's this push that creates this violence that we see in society, right? We see, unfortunately, these school shooters. We see, and again, it's so weird how we're constantly in this weird competition in life, right? I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's whether I'm merging on the freeway to whether I can do my work the fastest at work to to who's going to get the next promotion, and it's just, yeah, it just puts this angst in people's hearts and their lives, and I feel like it's, in a sense, right, what you're talking about with this conformity. It's a form of slavery in a
Oh
sense, right?
yeah. Oh yeah. That's
Um,
really, you hit the nail on the head, and people don't
yeah,
even realize, like, it's modern day slavery packaged as life.
yeah, yeah. Packaged as, and sometimes it's packaged weirdly as an American dream, or this is just what we do, and
Oh
and
yeah.
we put these stepstones in life that we have to achieve, right? You should be getting married by XYZ. You should be having a house. You should be making sure that you're got your retirement figured out. Needless to say that we're going to control the economy, and then when you go to retirement age, we're going to crash the market on you. But we won't talk about that.
Right.
We'll tell you to invest for the next 40 years so we can wipe it out on you in 2 years. So
Right. Well, and you lead to a really, really powerful, potent thing. And a lot of people are going to be like, well, that's just conspiracy. And it's like, but when you really like look at it, you're like, okay, majority of my day is spent working for somebody else
mhm,
to obtain money that I then have to give back, whether it's in taxes or
yeah,
housing or food or
yeah,
water, or you know what I mean, just like the necessities to live, right? So it's a trade-off, right? That energetic trade is
yeah,
essentially slavery.
yeah,
And people are not aware of it because it is so like generational. Like, this is just what has been done for so many years. And instead
right,
of actually like questioning like the system as a whole, people are like, well, that's just how it's always been. That's how it's always going to be. I
yeah,
can't stand being in circles like that, right? Because it's
yeah,
like we need to really come to terms with there is so many larger issues with the bigger agenda, and it's all breaking us down internally and collectively.
yeah,
And it's such an eye-opening thing when you start waking up to all of it, and you're like, oh, okay, so that now I see where the system's like really like infiltrated us in so many
yeah,
ways, and how it's just compounded on itself. So it's just like people are sitting here like, I have a problem with substances. No, the system has fucked you over, and unfortunately, you're now sitting here trying to take the responsibility for something that has contributed to the fact that, like, you're not capable of, you know, reclaiming your power and really, making better informed decisions based off of like what you actually want to do, instead of what you're the white picket fence mentality, like this American dream mentality. Like, it's literally shackles. I mean, you said it
right,
yourself, right? This whole 401k, I'm paying into Social Security that I'm never going to get. And it's like, well, at one point, can we sit here and opt out around a lot of this stuff and realize that like this isn't actually leading to a long-term, beautiful, successful life in the way that like success has been packaged to us, right? Like we've
Right.
been conditioned to believe that like a beautiful, successful life looks like checking off all these boxes. But
Right.
at the end of the day, your nervous system is so fucked because you've checked all these boxes versus I don't know how many of y'all have traveled the world, but you go to some of these lower socioeconomic countries and they are happier than we are because they have different working hours. They have different scheduled like weeks. They have siestas during the day. They get to spend more time with their families. Like they don't need to drive the Porsche. They don't need to have the multi-million-dollar house. They don't need to have these things that our
Right.
society here in America has forced us into believing is what's successful and what's going to drive happiness. Go and travel, and you will see that alternate societies are much happier with much less, and they're not struggling with the same. I mean, obviously everybody's got like their own level of conformity, but
Right.
there's different ways in which we can live our lives and choose to show up,
Yeah.
and that's going to open everybody's eyes to what freedom actually can be like, and true liberation.
I totally agree with you. I heard a quote that said, travel is the enemy to prejudice,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Because you get out there and you see that, whoa, there's people living a lot differently than we live, and
So different.
they seem to be figuring it out.
They're happy. They're
Yeah,
absolutely glowing.
I appreciate what you're saying because what's the interesting thing about my recovery journey is that up until 2008, I had a winery.
Oh,
Of
beautiful.
course, being an alcoholic, why not, right? So, but
Yeah.
I didn't admit I was an
If
alcoholic,
the shoe fits.
and the irony is that even like in my tasting room when I was serving people on the weekend, I'd recognize the continual people, right? And I'm sitting
I
there
hear
going,
you.
my customers are functioning alcoholics, and yet I didn't see myself as one. And so I started kind of having an actual moral dilemma about it, right? Because I
Hmm.
was like, ugh, I'm propagating potentially somebody's demise. I don't want to do that. Never
Right.
looking once at myself, even though basically around 2008, I got a DUI myself coming home from my winery. So thank God nothing worse happened. But so the inevitability of 2008, what happened, right? Everything lost, everybody lost, and I lost, and so I was going through a period of time where I was kind of working for friends. I was traumatized, obviously, because we'd filed Chapter 7. It was bad, right? Everything was liquidated, and so I was obviously shell shocked, dealing with trauma from that. I had stopped drinking because I had gotten the DUI, basically pled no contest to the judge, did my time, did my class, and basically was sober for 6 years from alcohol. I smoked weed, but I was sober from alcohol. I had gotten to the point 6 years into it that I was like, I'm cured. I can go back to drinking again, right? Year and a half into it, or basically not even a year and a half, it was a year. I basically had to put it away. And I did, and that was another 6 years. And then the last one was the one that got me. And the
Mm.
trajectory on my demise was so severe. But the thing about it was that in the process of going through all of this and dealing with, unfortunately, I lost a daughter in 2012. So there was compounded trauma that kind of happened, through those periods of life. And kind of just talking about that nervous system frying and just, trying to, be everything I needed to be for all parties around me while I was, in a sense, just a shell, of a man.
Mm.
But I really looked at my purpose in life, right? Because I had recognized that I was not getting happier in the ways that I thought I should be.
Right.
I was going for the materialistic dreams, if you will, right? I had a couple properties that had obviously some nice things. But it was interesting is that as I made more money, my desires became less. And then even to the point where I felt like I had made it, I felt it inherently empty. So that was really actually what propagated my journey back to Christ, my relationship with God, and how I just
Hmm.
kind of because I was yearning still, and the irony is that I get it all taken away from me, and it was interesting to see be obviously on both sides of that equation, but still more so trying to get to existential purpose and trying to find, my pathway. And I'm in the water industry now, and I have a purposeful job, and so I have a lot of joy in that now, right? And that's really helped drive my purpose, even though I feel like in a sense, I'm trying to do this through that conformity of slavery. So that's given me some weight off of my heart. But then obviously this has been a huge catalyst for me doing this podcast, because again, I feel like, you know, because it will frustrate you. I grew up in the 80s with the father that told me, hey, go to college, get yourself a degree, and you make 6 figures a year, you're going to be living high on the hog. Well, I'm doing better than that, and I am not. So, but again, that, that, that piece of advice is kind of, it's shallow. It's shallow, right? And I know that obviously my father unfortunately lost his parents at a young age. And so, he pretty much was a family man in his 20s with kids and lost his both of his parents in his 20s. So he was trying to figure out life himself, and he did great with it. But we all work within the bag that we have. So in this expansion of thought, right, this expansion in just living, right, this is how we continue to knock down those barriers. One of the things for me that and again you touched on, is that I'm very much a firm believer that unfortunately nothing may ever change in this world ever. And if anything, historical text has shown us that. We fight with each other, then we reconcile with each other. We get closer to God, we walk away from God. We're mean to each other, we have times of peace. We do this on macro levels as well as within relationships ourselves with each other. And it's just part of our being, right? So I think just simply becoming aware that that's what we are allows us to increase our compassion, our empathy for each other, right? And again, putting that healthy boundary for yourself up to realize you're not getting maybe personally attacked. And again, that comes down to this self-care and this growth in society. But I think that all we see as time moves on, we just see the amplifications of both sides. Those that are fighting more aggressively, and you have those that are screaming for peace even much more loudly, right? And so you have to choose, right? Where do you want to go with that? With all this information, with the things that you recognize you can and cannot control, how deep do you want to go into trying to change things you can't control versus where do you want to find your peace? How do you want to impact the world in a way that's, is maybe safe for you, but is meaningful for you, right? And I think that that's been the huge positive side of social media. I think that's the thing that people talk about, it being a cancer and being negative thing. Sure, everything has two sides of the coin, but there's been a huge movement in people being able to be authentic, put their voices out there. And because we're tired of the facades, right? We're tired of the acting, right? We want good, strong information now. I don't want to sit here and go through a 3-week seminar with you for you to beat around the bush, for me to tell me now that I need to read something else and spend another 6 months to a year on it. Well, I need purpose. I got so much time on my hands, right? It's like even trying to get into recovery. I'll give you 30 days, but I'm sure it's only going to give you the rest of my life for recovery. Well, it's like, well, that's the only way that this works, is being in it for the rest of your life. And we're impatient, right?
I think the one thing that really stuck out to me is like we cannot change the world on our own, right? So like
Right.
eliminating that pressure that we were putting on ourselves, but what we can do is we can take ownership over our own healing, right?
Yeah.
And don't underestimate the ripple effect of
Right.
your own choices to change, right? Like I'm not saying go out and quit your job. I'm
Right.
not saying that. Not with
Right.
this economy. But
Yeah.
you can shift in the way in which you're going to work or who you're working for, right? You found something with a little bit more purpose that lights you up. And in the interim, you're also providing an opportunity for people to connect in this podcast as well. And so, your soul feels fulfilled. But like there are ways in which we can choose to change, and that will have a lasting impact not only on ourselves but like obviously on our children and or on our family members who are witnessing us from the sidelines, or people that we engage with like from the outreach of like this podcast, right? Like there is a ripple effect of how this is impacting people, whether we can see it in the immediate or in the long term. And I think, I am also of faith as well, and just trusting the fact that like we are being guided by a higher power, and understanding that like that has shaped the way in which like health and healing can take a different approach. It is all obviously very individualized. It's however you choose to work and navigate your journey, but it all takes courage, one step at a time. Even if we don't necessarily, like you said, you don't want to be in a 3 to 6 month course and being like, okay, that could have been like a 15-minute email. But right, but like understanding that like it's not just a broken record the way that
Right.
we look at it. it's a spiral of continuum that goes up. So it's like,
Yeah.
yes, you are necessarily reverting back to the same lesson, but that lesson is now with a newfound information, with new tools, with new strategies. So it's like every time you revisit that same lesson that's being presented to you, you're coming from it with more, with a better head on your shoulders and a better way of addressing it. And it just continues to evolve, you know, like you were saying, like we do want to evolve and we are evolving. And it's an ability for you to step back and kind of take the bird's eye view and see like, okay, like how is this pattern representing itself? How can I take the new lessons that I've learned and the new strategies and the tools that I have to navigate it completely differently? And then the next time that it presents itself, you know, you're just constantly going through the same story, but as a different, more evolved character, right?
I think that's huge what you're saying, and I agree with you. It's kind of like, I guess, if you read the Bible for a day versus reading it for a year, you're gonna have two different perspectives on it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I do agree that sometimes we have to kind of pound things into our heads and our hearts, right, over periods of time, just to as we continue to grow in knowledge. My obviously concern is that a lot of times I think people are looking. I mean, we're obviously looking for some saving from someone else, especially in our addiction, if we get to that point that we can't help ourselves anymore, right? But at the same time, we are also scared and skittish that someone's going to take advantage of our weakness, right? Um, and so again, this is a two-way street, right? People have to realize that, right? You're not gonna be able to just go somewhere and then 30 days later you're gonna magically be better. You got to put work in. You're gonna
Yes,
put the work in,
absolutely.
and the work is part of that evolution to get you, to understand how it came to be and how we get past.
Yeah.
Um, Double back on relationships. I'm curious because you
Yeah.
talked
Yeah.
about the relationships with your friends and just how that was kind of odd, trying to get through that. Do you still maintain relationships with those people?
So the most immediate individuals that come to mind that I was actually in active addiction with, I am not super
Okay.
close with. Some of them I do not talk to anymore. Some of them, you know, it's very brief interactions like through social media, like, how are you? You look like you're doing great. Like, but not necessarily hanging out with them on a day-to-day basis. I have
Yeah.
been able to maintain my friend groups from, you know, I have the same best friend since I was 5. And, you know, I've been able
Cool.
to really maintain like chapters throughout the course of my life with friends, just because that's just who I am as an individual. Like I've been able to really nurture and cultivate beautiful soul family over the course of my life. And to those who are entering into this path, it's like understanding that if somebody is not in favor of the direction that you're heading in, see it as a filtration process. Realize that you do not have to grant everyone access to you. And that is a privilege. Like that is a gift that you get to reclaim, right? Like if somebody is not in favor of the direction in which you're going, honor that and trust that you are evolving in a way that they can't come with you. And that is nothing against them. And it's not a bash against you, but it's just a part of the evolutionary journey, right? Like, say, for example, okay, you had friends when you were in elementary school, but then you go off to middle school, you evolved. But sometimes those friends go to different schools. It's not because anything was bad or wrong or whatever. It's natural. It's just that's how life progresses. And so essentially, it's like we are at Earth School, and every chapter that you navigate has, you know, beginnings and endings, and there are people that, you know, navigate that chapter with you, or they you part ways, you know. And so I think it's just it's inevitable, and it's not something that I feel like people need to be scared of as much as they are. I think they need to see it as a gift. You know, like the saying goes, you are the top 5 people that you hang out with. Okay, well, look at your immediate 5 people that you hang out with. Like, do you actually really love, honor, cherish, and want to be around them all the time? Like, do you want to be that person? And I will tell you, like those that I was in active addiction with, like I I don't miss those relationships. Um, Not because I don't love those people, but because I love who I've become more. And I'm grateful for the experiences and the newfound relationships that I've been able to cultivate from that. I've been blessed with so many different souls in my life since then that I feel a better sense of community because I'm able to connect with people in a more deeper way, in a more spiritual way, in a way that's not um, collective numbing. Like I don't want to collectively numb around people anymore. I want to feel safe in their presence. I want to be held by them, and I want to hold space for them and be there for them as well. So yeah, it's a really interesting, really important and interesting conversation to be having because I feel like that's a lot of the struggle that people have with entering into this recovery space is I'm going to lose all my friends. You may, yes, if they're not able to hold space for you and to empower you, but like, are those really the friends that you want to have anyways? It's like an honest question that you have to have with
Yeah,
yourself.
unfortunately, people say, well, they're my only friends. So, they don't want to put the work in or they're just
Right.
afraid. It's just what they know. It's familiar. We're habits, right? We're habitual creatures.
We are.
You just said something that totally like my mind, and I absolutely love it. And we're going to basically, it's going to be a clip. So, Earth
Okay,
School.
amazing.
We're in
Earth
Earth
School.
School.
We are in
We're in
Earth
Earth
School.
School. I love
Yep.
it. I
Yep.
absolutely love it because that's the
Yep.
truth. And
Yeah.
if everybody just focuses every morning on life in that regard, what
Yeah.
is Earth School trying to teach me?
Exactly.
The
Exactly. And
curiosity that we'd have? Yeah.
yeah, and it's one of those things where like you were saying it earlier, you were like, I have to keep like replaying the same information over and over and over again before I fully digest it. And it's like, okay, think about I have a nephew. He's 1.5. Every day he touches my nose and my eyes like about 30-40 times. And so I'm like, nose, eyes, nose, eyes. And eventually he's going to be able to say it. But think about how many times he needed to hear it so that
Right.
way he could be able to enunciate it and actually fully vocalize it, right?
Right.
So it doesn't matter if you're 1.5 or you're 30 or you're 55 or you're in your 60s, you still have to listen to the same information over and over and over again
Right.
as a student before you reach mastery. And you don't even have to listen to, you also have to experiment with it. You're gonna have failures, you're gonna have like wins, you're gonna then be a teacher and then you're gonna be a master. And so it's like if you really do, like you said, take a step back and look at, okay, what is my curriculum for today? When I wake up in the morning as a student, what is my curriculum for today? And
Okay.
really seeing that breakdown of like, okay, it kind of like takes the weight off your shoulders where you're like, okay, whatever, I'm gonna fail, or there's gonna be things that aren't gonna, I'm not gonna ace it today, but it's like whatever. Like you have a lifetime to be able to really master some of these skill sets. And I mean, if you don't master them then this lifetime, well, so what? Your soul is eternal. You don't learn it in this lifetime, you will be learning it eventually. So it's like,
Yeah, you had, and I agree. And I think that's, we start, we start getting away at that point. We start getting away from the distractions of the world, right? And I think that's where again, purpose, a sense of peace can come over us. And because I'm very much even like when we have these these divisions that we have in life that's either politicized, right, or it's racially charged and things like that. I tell it starts at the interaction with the gas station attendant, right? How are you treating that person regardless of who they are, right? And we can, regardless of how much the world from a macro level is trying to push down these negativisms on us, right? We in our day-to-day interactions define that truth, right? We define it in letting that person merge into the highway with us, right? We in those common courtesies, holding the door open for someone, saying good morning to someone, just the simplest of things, right? We define the truth in all that, right? Because that's where the energy is transferred, right? The energy is transferred between each other in our hearts and how we interact with each other. You had talked about this freely giving of a gift. And I think that that's huge right now because I think a lot of people are coming to be aware that, I'm an open and honest person and I share I'm deep with X, Y, or Z person. And then I find that they use that to manipulate me.
Yeah.
or I find that they use it to their advantage. And so people immediately go, well, I'm just going to shut down then and never express myself. Or they have to sit there and decide where and how they put up healthy boundaries, right?
Yep.
And they still get to choose. It's like, just because the reception is what it is, that doesn't necessarily mean that I should be changing how I operate in this world also, right?
Right.
Because this is my example of how I think God wants me to behave, right? This is how I exhibit that. This is how I preach the gospel, if you will, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that because I think you have a lot of people out there that are feeling crushed in life, that feel like their hearts are wider than most people are. And again, they're not built for this world, right? In a sense.
Right.
So I want to protect those people too. And I want to sit there and tell them, no, what you're doing is beautiful. Don't ever stop, right? But you also want to do it in a way that you feel like you have some armor on to protect against that negative, because it's always going to be
Absolutely.
at you.
I think what it really all boils down to is like having discernment, right? Is that
Right.
like not everybody has the right to have access to you, and that includes your bloodline. Like that was like a
Mm,
big thing for
mm,
me, was like,
yeah.
I was very much forthcoming with my energy and my time with my family, even though they were the ones driving me into my deepest addictions. And it got to a point in my healing journey that I like had to take a step back and was like, it's not their right.
Yeah.
Is a privilege that I get to grant.
Yeah.
And that goes to show for like anybody, right? Like if
Right.
somebody has manipulated you in a way and it breaks your heart, like you have the discernment to be able to say, do I want to grant them access to me anymore? Right? Like that is
Yeah.
a choice that you get to
Yeah.
make.
Yeah.
And obviously like it can be very challenging. It can be really hard, but like you said, we are creatures of community, and like we do seek external validation. And that has also been conditioned into us, by the school system, right? It's like we want to do good with our classwork, so we get praised by the teachers, so then we get praised by our parents, right? It is something that is ingrained in us, and then it carries on into the workforce, right? Like I want
Yeah.
to excel in my work environment. I want to do more than the person in the cubicle sitting next to me. Like I want to sell more units than the person on my team, so that way
Yeah.
I can get praised either by my paycheck or by my boss, right? And so it is something that is constantly being um you know lived every single day,
It's
and
an
it's
angst. It's
hard to
just this
break out of
underlying
it.
angst in our lives, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to break out of that. It's hard to break out of that, but awareness is key, right?
Right.
Awareness that you have the ability to discern and then choose, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's 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 a really hard skill, but I think that if people started really practicing that muscle, right? Like going to the gym every day. It's like, okay, like
Right.
you're not going to turn out buff tomorrow if you go to the gym for one day, but if you start to realize that like, okay, I have the ability to have awareness, to discern whether this is good for me or not good for me. I have the right to choose differently and or the same. And it's something that you just constantly just keep practicing.
No, for
And you get
sure.
to a point where you're like, okay, putting up boundaries is so fucking easy for me. It's like
You
you
know,
say one wrong thing, I already got you down. Like I know who you are, and you're like, and I don't, that's not somebody that I need to grant access to me any further. So now I'm just rambling, but
you're good. No, I know. I love it. Because this is all important because we don't know who we are, especially if your addiction's been long enough. You've gone through iterations of decades potentially, right? And so, and even just like with the trauma, right? There's a lot of understanding that when the trauma happened, right? That's basically your age is locked in at that point, right? You
yes,
have an inability to grow.
correct.
But nonetheless, there's this sense of but nonetheless, life still evolved and you may be doing different things and you may be having different responsibilities and such. But at the end of the day, when you remove this from you and you start getting back into who you are, it is scary. It can be very scary, right? Because I
Yeah.
think that, especially for me, it's like, and for a lot of people, right, the question is what came first, the mental health issues or the addiction, right? And so I had to get to a comfort level with who I was in that regard, right? And
Hmm.
at the whole time that it was revealing itself, it was showing me everything that I wasn't knew and was questioning. for so long, the difference in how I just related to things and or received things. And it explains so much in my life. The one regret, right, is that if I had more aware eyes around me growing up, I might have been earlier diagnosed. Right. But in this same vein of our conversation here, there's this notion of conformity. There's this notion of we can knock it out of you, right? We can
Oh
get you
yeah.
to, in
Yeah.
much the same way that we have to tell ourselves in recovery the 50 times until it sinks, we're going to do the same thing to you just to conform to our will, and so there is a positive reiteration versus a negative reiteration in society that can, or within your own heart, that you have to be mindful of. And because again, that does nothing for the self-esteem, right? I am not
Right.
in line. I'm constantly failing. I need to get in line. Why is your behavior like this? That's not how people act. What are you doing? And so it's a psychological trip on you. It's
Yeah.
it's a it's
It
it's a
is.
it's a head game, and that
Without
can
the medicine. And what you're speaking to is like the fact that like we thrive in packs. And if we leave the pack, then who are we, right? And so it is an
right,
issue of identity. It's like, okay, well, if I'm not following the pack, then where do I belong?
right.
And I think it's like that's a matter of like the courage that it takes to redefine like where your pack could actually be. Like if it's not with the pack that's like basically sheep at this point, it's like call the kettle black, right? Like if I'm not conforming with the rest of the sheep and I realize that I'm a wolf, that I need to go and actually find like the wolf pack instead of the sheep pack, and it's just like
Right.
really figuring out like yeah, that like the conformity is it's a slippery slope and we've been manipulated, and that's really a lot of the work that I do in my practice is like showing people what that like I learned behavior modification. Like I understand what it looks like to take somebody's motivator and use it as like a consequence, whether positive or negative, and then program them into behaving in the way that you want them to behave. You know what I mean? So it's just like all of these psychological tools that I was trained to basically break my children with autism and have them conform have been overly used on us as a society to conform. And so when I basically like was able to see this, I was like, I don't want to partake in this. Like I don't want to implement it on people, and now I need to figure out how to unimplement it on myself. And that's where the psychedelics came into play. It was like it gave me an opportunity to rewire my brain and to get rid of the faulty software that had been downloaded, and really start operating from my own sovereign being.
Perfect. Perfect. Yeah. And I think that day one of recovery helps you stand on your own 2 feet again, right? If you empower yourself with to thine own self be true, right? And recognize that you do still have your best intentions at heart. You will always have your own best of intentions at heart, right? So embrace it, be able to stand as a pillar for a second, right? As yourself.
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, this has been great, Ashley. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, the relationships have been very weird for me. Dynamically, the ones that are good enough arm's distance have been surprisingly good. Half of the family side has been improving tremendously, and the other half has been in a very weird segue.
Yeah.
And we start talking about again this notions of conformity or notions of it's still always been your fault, Dusty.
Mm,
this has always been on you, right?
right.
I've never done anything wrong. This has always been because of your mental health or your addiction,
Right.
right? And I'm going to die on that hill, right? And so I have to sit there and I go, that's fine, but I'm going to go ahead and now push myself a little bit further away from
Absolutely.
you, right?
100%.
Because again, this freely giving of my gift, I've recognized I've done it with a lot of my family as well.
Mm,
And I know that I have to sit there and again, it's really just been more so a huge discernment period over the last, because I'm a little over 2 years now in sobriety. But kind of threw me for a blindside. I mean, of the ones that I thought that were going to be so blessed and so happy and everything, right? Because
right.
I am a different person. That person should be dead and gone now. The
Yeah.
third time's a charm with this one, because I know of the failings that I had in my 2 unsuccessful attempts at sobriety. I recognized why the flaws were there. And I got that by truly walking into a 30-day inpatient, right? Um, So, but at the very least, the beautiful thing about it is that because being bipolar, I'm a very, very emotional person. I can be, right. I very much can wear it on my sleeve. Um, but I'm healthy about this perspective. Whereas in an addictive state and non-medicated, I'd be in the weeds about it daily, daily, consuming my life. And I'm not even close to that anymore. And I'm so thankful for that. And sobriety's
Yeah.
brought that to me.
We really hit a important part is that like misery loves company, right?
Right.
And I'm gonna give you the analogy like if you ever gone crab hunt fishing, which most people haven't, but you can just imagine you throw a basket into the water and you pull up a basket full of crabs, and those who are navigating the early stages of sobriety and or on the path of recovery are at the top of the basket. And
Yeah.
those who choose to not recover or to heal or to face their own wounds or the wounding that they've inflicted are the crabs at the bottom trying to keep you from escaping, try
Yeah.
to pull you back in.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where you have to as an individual decide and see, okay, where am I? I'm at the top of the basket. Like I'm not going to
Yeah.
let these people have access to me anymore.
Yeah.
Why? Because I'm not going to be their company.
Right.
I'm not going to be their company, right? I have done so much work and healing, and I've been so courageous in what it is that I'm choosing. I'm not going to let anybody sit here and, dim that or take that away from me.
Right.
And yeah, it's a really hard thing because like you said, like you've done a lot of work and you want people to honor that and see that, and that's just not where they're at, and it hurts and it sucks, but it doesn't stop us from continuing on because there are a lot of other great people out there who are going to be touched by this podcast, who are going to be grateful for the words in which that we're sharing, and there's other people who are going to be able to honor what it is that we're doing, and we're never even going to meet them.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. Um, yeah, because it is painful, right? I mean, let's not kid ourselves, right? You have these ones that you figured were in your corner, and now for some reason there's this resistance, and you're like,
Yep.
and so you're trying to emotionally navigate that in the process of dealing with your own bag, and it's a lot, and it is painful, and it requires change. Change is sometimes it's mostly necessary, but it still doesn't come without the aches and pains with it. You touched on something a little bit ago that I want to kind of circle back to. And I'm trying to remember what reference we were talking about, but I wrote down here, the joy is gone. And one of the things that I've recognized with myself as I've gone through this point in life is that I definitely, and I know I'm still recovering in my brain, right? I'm a little over 2 years. These typically say 6 months to 2 years, right? But nonetheless, my hunting for joy is different, but the way in which I feel it is different. There's the notion of of anhedonia, I think it's called, right, where you're kind of devoid of feeling, devoid of things that being important. Not a full depression, but just kind of like there's no gravity to anything, and that can lead to a depressive state, right, and or especially me being a bipolar, right? I would swing so hard, right? And on the high side, right? I mean, I was loving it, right? I missed those feelings at times, right? On the depressive
Hmm.
side, forget about it. I never want to experience those ever again.
Right.
And those are the ones that actually drove me to go get help, right? It wasn't the manic side. The manic side, I was king of the world, right? And I can do anything.
Yep.
Um, but so it's this navigating of what's supposed to make us feel good again. What does happiness mean? Um, and so first of all, right, for somebody in recovery, right, those first couple of years, yeah, the walking the dog after work may feel like it's a waste of time that provides you with nothing, but 2 years down the road, you're gonna be maybe looking forward to it, right?
Yeah.
Um, and the going to the gym, or going out to dinner with some friends and not drinking seems like it might be torture. Then 2 years down the road, you can actually do it with complete conviction and no problem.
Yep.
And so, I tell people that because, yeah, you may never experience your feelings the same way, right? In sobriety. But that's usually a good thing because unfortunately the swing in the emotions is what usually drove us to poor decision making, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and or just opening up our mouths and saying things that we now have to we've maybe burned a bridge because of, or um, so what's your advice for people on that?
Yeah, so I definitely think that, choosing this path of healing does grant you a second chance at life, essentially, right? It's an
Yeah.
opportunity for you to redefine who you are and how you choose to walk through this, this experience. And that means that a lot of things are going to shift, right? So in a really beautiful way. It's an opportunity for you to redefine, like, what does joy look like actually for you? Not this white picket fence dream that we've been sold, right? Like, maybe at one point you were like, I wanted to be engaged and be married, and that was going to bring me joy. And then I don't know if this lands with anybody, but then you find yourself divorced and you're like, okay, that person probably wasn't the best fit for me, and now you could have been in that depressed state where you're like, well, why did I make that decision? But now you can come out on the other end of it and you've learned from this experience and you're like, okay, now I'm going to have more discernment with who it is that I choose to let access to me, and now I get to find joy in another person. And so, it's just a matter of perspective, right? It's like, okay, were the things that I chose to have joy from actually because they sparked joy inside of me, or because I was trying to fulfill some societal pressure
Right.
that inevitably broke me? Is this an opportunity for me to redefine like what joy looks like for me? So like I chose the path of also going to school and pursuing a career, and I did have a lot of passion for it and I did enjoy a lot of joy from it. But it also broke me. And so then I ended up, getting the confidence and the courage to be able to walk away from that career and start a new one. And now I get to reignite that passion again from a different lens of joy. And it's ironic because it's actually very similar to the work that I was doing before. It's just now I'm supporting a different population, but the tools, the vehicle, everything's pretty much relatively the same. And so it's just like it's just being able to go through that grieving cycle, right? Like a lot of people inherently see grief as like the loss of a loved one. Well, they're not actually in tune with the fact that like you can grieve a career, you can grieve an experience that you just had with an individual, you can grieve a lifestyle that you used to have, or anything. You can grieve on a day-to-day basis. And so understanding what that system looks like, right? It's like denial, anger, bartering, depression, acceptance, right? And it's not linear. I've accepted that I'm sober, but then I can get angry at the fact that, like, well, why did I wait so many years to talk about it? Right? Like now I'm depressed because I feel like I should have been further along. And, like there's just like, it's so interesting, the grief cycle. And so it's imperative actually to really understand, like, okay, well, what are all the different levels of the grief cycle? Where am I at on a day-to-day basis? You can be experiencing more than one of them at the same time, and then nurturing yourself through that. Like, what do I need to support myself when I'm in denial, if I'm even aware of it? Or like, how do I support myself like when I'm in that depressed state? Or how do I honor myself when I've accepted it? Right. So yeah, I think that it takes a lot of different shapes, and it's part of our evolution.
Totally agree with you. Yeah, it's the only way through it is through it, right?
Yeah.
And that's the toughest thing, is that most just simply don't even want to deal with it, right?
Right.
Life's too busy. I don't have the time to
Right.
truly stop for myself and go
Right.
through all the pain that it takes, right? Um, and eventually it's going to reveal itself.
Absolutely.
And the thing about it is that our message is that let's not waste time on going through that process, because
Right.
you don't want the regret of lost time because you weren't able to fess up to it. Um,
Right.
and I
Well, and it
I
all
did
boils
go ahead.
back down to the conditioning component of it, right? Is that like
Right.
this is how it's always been, this is how it's always going to be, and you have the right to reclaim that and say, no, it ends here. I don't have
Yeah.
to overexert myself with a busy day to day. I
Mhm.
can make better decisions about what's in alignment for my nervous system, what's better in alignment for
Yeah.
like my mental health, right? And then choosing differently. You don't want to lose time, you know? Like
Right.
we have the here and the now, and it's like, okay, I don't want to abide by these systems anymore. I want to operate completely differently because that system broke me. Do I
Right.
want to allow that system to have access to me anymore? Like we can discern that. We can choose that. Like and redefine what it's going to look like for us individually.
Yeah. Yeah. And patience is key.
True.
Having the willingness to, to look at things with, the eyes of a toddler, right? Everything's new and
Yeah.
experienced, right? And and what may feel like it's a waste of time may provide fruit for you later on, but be
Yeah.
willing to discover what that looks like, right?
Right.
Um, and yeah, you may find that you're completely different from where you were just, a year ago.
Well, and think about it for a toddler. Like think about how many times a toddler falls down. He doesn't give up and
Right.
chooses that he's never going to walk,
Right.
right? He keeps trying until he's running. You know, and
Yeah.
so it's like imagine life through the lens of a toddler's eyes. I'm going to continue to fall until I can run. And that's
Right.
it. You just continue to persevere.
Yep. This has been great. I'm just kind of going through the questions that I'd sent you. I didn't know if there was anything else that you wanted to touch on from those questions. One thing that's been kind of interesting to me has been, I mean, the way you're talking, I got to assume that you don't deal with any triggers anymore. Am I right on
That's
that?
not true.
Okay. 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 Well, that's good.
That's not true.
What
That's not true.
provokes
I'm
those?
human. Huh?
What provokes those? What provokes them? What provokes the trigger?
You know, societal pressure is a big one. I kind of just alluded to it a little bit. Like I've been in my recovery journey for 5 years, you know, and
Right.
I look at people on social media who have, you know, they've only been speaking about their journey for like the last year or 2 years, and I'm like kicking myself, and I'm like, why wasn't I more courageous before? You know, like and it was because I was still in my own integration. Like I was not comfortable speaking about what my experience was because I
Mm-hmm.
needed to actually, like you said earlier, walk through my own fire and redetermine like what my own truth was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I get triggered by that like I'm not further along in the way
Mm-hmm.
that I think society forces me to think. I'm triggered by my family. Like it's still an ongoing thing. You know, the way in which they communicate with each other. I used to feel like I had to be the referee. Like I was the one that had to try to litigate the issue. And
Right.
by doing so, I was literally just adding fuel to a fire. And now I got to a point where like I'm just sitting on the sidelines with fucking s'mores and I'm like, you people want to go at it. Like I'm just gonna I'm this has nothing to do with me. This has nothing to
Yeah.
do with me. Not my
Yeah.
monkey, not my circus, and I'm not going to pay tickets to
Right.
come and see the show anymore. So that in of itself has taken time for me to be able to discern like where is my place in all of this.
Right.
Can I have compassion for myself for where I am professionally? Yes, absolutely. Can I have more discerning around like how my family has access to me and if I actually even get involved? Absolutely. So you know, just like two ends of the spectrum of like different triggers that I feel like have really been raw and real for me as of late, and how I choose to handle them very differently because they're very different things, right? One requires compassion and sympathy, and the other one is just discernment. It's like this is not something that I need to bother myself with anymore, you know, and
Yeah.
totally detach from it. So
Yeah. So it's interesting because yeah, mine aren't. I can be in a bar, if I had to meet somebody over there, which I'd never do anyway. But or I could have
mhm,
dinner and somebody could be drinking alcohol at the table. Doesn't bother me.
right,
Um, events that catalyzes stressor response to me cause it. Right. So driving home from Tahoe, really nasty snowstorm. I got home and I was fried. My nervous system was
yeah,
just shot, and that would have
right,
usually been a provocation for drinking.
right,
Definitely would have
right,
provoked drinking. Um, and so yeah, it's that's and so at the very least, again, tools. Recognize it when it shows up. Broadcast it out to those around me that love me. Hey,
yeah,
this is where I'm at.
yep,
I'm going to ride this out. I've got my sobriety group on. Basically, we're on a WhatsApp chat, so we just chat it out if we need to. Also, somebody would come over if I needed the help too. But it's being able to sit in the uncomfortable with that, because that's really the test, right? The physiology's going, hey, let's take care of this now. And your brain's in your heart saying, nope, this is how we got to where we got to. So let's
Yeah.
not, and just writing it out and letting yourself calm down. Because that's the thing that I found, as I've gotten older, with stress being such a powerful thing. It definitely has a physiological effect to me, right? And it just makes me uncomfortable in my own skin. And
Yeah.
that's usually the catalyst. Ashley, this has been great.
It's been lovely.
I appreciate the time.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Rebel Beyond Sobriety. Feel free to slide into my DMs if you have any questions, especially about psychedelic use. If that is something that you are interested in or open up to, I want to educate people on how to do it safely. And so that's a really, really big component of like the work that I do. And obviously, like I am a sobriety coach, so I am open to supporting people navigating what recovery looks like for them individually. It is not a one size fits all program. I really, really love to provide that individualized, and it's a co-creation. It's a co-creation with each individual. So, yeah, I would love to be of support to people in any way they need. But definitely wanting to just preface the fact that like working with psychedelics is an intention that requires, to ensure that like all your bases are covered and you're going in it with a really secure foundation to ensure that you're getting the most out of it and you're safe. So
I love it. Is there like a telehealth option, I'm assuming, or like a web-based, therapy option with you?
yeah, so it is all virtual.
Okay.
Yep, it is all
Okay.
virtual.
Perfect.
I'm actually currently going to school to get a second master's degree in licensed mental health counseling, so that way I can
Okay.
potentially at some point open up my own practice and take, insurance and stuff like that. But right now it's just all private. So, but
Okay.
it is virtual.
Wonderful. That's the beauty of also the internet, is that you can get
Isn't it
you can
great?
get people from any part of the world that want to get some help. So
Exactly.
Ashley,
Exactly.
this has been great. I wish you continued success in all of your endeavors.
Thank you.
Keep up the great work and keep spreading the awareness. And we'll get you on the
Appreciate
show
it.
again soon. Okay.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Thank
got
you very
lots to
much.
talk
Okay.
about.
Lots to talk about. There always is in sobriety, right? Yeah. Life is rich.
Exactly.
So
Yeah, it is
you take
rich.
care.
It is. You as
Yeah.
well.
Have a great day.
You as well.